The words cut through the laughter and crystal clinking like a blade through silk. Honestly, I only married her out of pity. Nobody else wanted her. Amara's fork stopped midway to her mouth. The roasted salmon on her plate blurred as her vision tunneled. Around the long mahogany table at Corinthian, the most expensive restaurant in the city, 6 faces turned toward her husband Julian. Waiting. Watching for her reaction. She set down her fork with deliberate care. The silver clinked against fine china, a sound that seemed thunderous in the sudden pocket of silence that had formed around their end of the table. Julian Sterling, her husband of 3 years, sat at the head of the table in his tailored navy suit. His handsome face wore that careless smile she'd once found charming. Now it looked cruel. He raised his wine glass toward his business partner, Richard, who had just made some joke about marriage being a trap. "I'm serious," Julian continued, his voice carrying that easy confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences. She was nearly 30, single, working some dead-end job at a small firm. I thought I was being charitable, giving her the life she could never have achieved on her own. Richard laughed, a booming sound that made other diners glance over. His wife, Diane, tittered behind her hand. The Hutchinsons, an older couple Julian was courting for an investment deal, smiled uncomfortably. Even Martin, Julian's lawyer, chuckled while adjusting his glasses. They were all looking at her now, waiting to see if she'd cry, if she'd make a scene, if she'd prove Julian right by showing she was as pathetic as he claimed. Amara felt heat crawl up her neck. Not from embarrassment. From rage so pure it felt like ice in her veins. 3 years. 3 years she'd supported this man. Given up her career trajectory to play the perfect billionaire's wife. Hosted his parties. Smiled through his condescension. Ignored the late nights and perfume that wasn't hers on his shirts. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice came out steady. "Come. I need to use the restroom." She pushed back her chair and stood. Her red dress, the one Julian had insisted she wear tonight because it made her look presentable, suddenly felt like armor. She walked past the table, past the other diners, past the ornate mirrors and gold fixtures, into the marble bathroom. Inside the spacious ladies' room, Amara gripped the edge of the counter. Her reflection stared back at her. Dark brown skin glowing under the flattering lights. Natural hair styled in elegant twists pinned up. Dark eyes that had once looked at Julian with something close to love. What a fool she'd been. Her phone buzzed in her small clutch. She pulled it out. A text from her old mentor, Patricia Okonkwo. "How's the dinner? Remember what we discussed. You're worth more than he'll ever be." Patricia didn't know the half of it. Nobody did. Amara had been so careful to maintain the illusion of the happy marriage. The perfect couple. The self-made billionaire and his elegant wife. She'd given up her position as a junior architect at Morrison & Associates, a firm where she'd been on track for partnership. Julian had convinced her that his social obligations required a full-time hostess. That her career was cute, but unnecessary given his wealth. That she should support his empire instead of building her own. She'd believed him. Trusted him. Loved him. Standing in that bathroom, Amara made a decision. The humiliation crystallizing into something hard and bright and absolutely certain. She would not cry. She would not confront him here. She would not give him the satisfaction of her pain. Instead, she would destroy him. Not with emotion. Not with drama. With precision. With evidence. With the same strategic thinking that had made her a promising architect. She would take apart his life the way she'd once deconstructed buildings to understand their weaknesses. Amara reapplied her lipstick. A bold burgundy that Julian hated because he said it made her look too confident. She straightened her shoulders. Fixed a pleasant, neutral expression on her face. When she returned to the table, the conversation had moved on. Julian was discussing some merger, his hands gesturing expansively. He barely glanced at her as she sat down. "Everything all right, dear?" Diane asked with false sweetness. "Perfect," Amara said. She picked up her wine glass and took a small sip. "Julian was just telling everyone how charitable he is. It's one of the things I admire most about him. He's always taking in projects others have given up on." The words could have been sincere. Her tone was exactly right. Light. Affectionate. But Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. He was sharper than Julian gave him credit for. Julian, oblivious, reached over and patted her hand. The touch made her skin crawl. "That's my girl. Always supportive. His girl. His project. His charity case." For the rest of the dinner, Amara played her part perfectly. She laughed at the right moments. Asked polite questions. Complimented Diane's dress. listened attentively to Mr. Hutchinson's story about his grandson. But inside her mind was racing, calculating, planning. She thought about Julian's home office, which she'd never been invited to enter but had a key to from when they first moved into the penthouse. She thought about the documents he carelessly left on his desk, assuming she was too stupid or too compliant to understand their significance. She thought about the nights he'd come home late, smelling of perfume and lies, while she pretended to be asleep. She thought about the prenup she'd signed, the one Julian's lawyer Martin had assured her was standard, while rushing her through the signatures 2 days before their wedding. The prenup that gave her almost nothing if they divorced. But prenups could be challenged, especially if one party had committed fraud, or hidden assets, or violated the terms of the marriage contract through infidelity. Amara had been a good wife, a patient wife, a trusting wife. That ended tonight. "We should do this again," Julian said as dinner wound down, signaling for the check. "Maybe next month." "Richard, you and Diane are free?" "Absolutely," Richard said. He glanced at Amara again, that calculating look still in his eyes. "Mrs. Sterling, you've been unusually quiet tonight." "Just thinking," Amara said smoothly, "about all the changes coming." "Changes?" Julian frowned. "In the season," she said. "Fall is coming. Everything changes in fall." Diane laughed. "How poetic." As they left the restaurant, Julian's hand on the small of her back possessive and cold, Amara looked up at the city skyline. Somewhere up there was the penthouse she'd helped decorate. The home she'd made for a man who saw her as a charity project. Not for much longer. The drive home was quiet. Julian scrolled through his phone, already bored with her presence. His driver, Thomas, caught Amara's eye in the rearview mirror. In 3 years, Thomas had always been kind to her. Respectful. He looked concerned now. She gave him a small smile. Thomas had seen a lot. Knew a lot. She wondered if he'd be willing to talk when the time came. Back at the penthouse, Julian went straight to his office. "Don't wait up," he called over his shoulder. "I have work to finish." "Work? Right." Amara went to their bedroom and changed out of the red dress. She hung it carefully in the closet, then pulled on comfortable clothes. Jeans. A soft green sweater. Sneakers. She looked at herself in the mirror again. This was who she really was. Not Julian's dressed-up doll. Not his charity project. Amara Bennett. Almost partner at Morrison & Associates before Julian convinced her to quit. Graduate of Howard University with honors. Designer of 3 buildings that still stood in the downtown area, even if her name wasn't on the plaques. She'd lost herself in this marriage. But she was about to find herself again. From the office down the hall, she heard Julian's voice. He was on the phone, his tone intimate and low. Talking to whoever he was seeing behind her back. Good. Let him be distracted. Amara pulled out her laptop and opened a new document. At the top, she typed, "Evidence Collection Log." Then she began to write down everything she could remember. Every suspicious phone call. Every late night. Every lie. She noted dates, times, people present. Created a timeline of their marriage, marking the moments when things had started to shift. It was past midnight when she finally closed the laptop. Julian still hadn't come to bed. She could hear music playing in his office. He only listened to jazz when he was drinking expensive scotch and feeling pleased with himself. He'd humiliated her tonight. Told his friends she was unwanted. Unloved. A pity case. He had no idea what he'd actually done. He'd freed her. Freed her from guilt. From obligation. From any remaining shred of affection that might have made her hesitate. Amara lay down in their bed, but she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, watching the city lights paint patterns across the white surface, and planned her escape. By morning, she knew exactly what she needed to do. 3 years earlier, Amara had believed in fairy tales. She stood in front of the mirror in her small apartment, adjusting the simple black dress she'd bought for the charity gala. At 29, she'd been proud of what she'd accomplished. Junior architect at Morrison & Associates. 3 successful projects in her portfolio. A modest but comfortable life built entirely through her own efforts. The gala was a work obligation. Morrison & Associates was a sponsor, and all staff were expected to attend. Amara hated these events. The forced networking. The small talk with wealthy donors who looked through her rather than at her. But Patricia Okonkwo, the senior partner who'd mentored her since she joined the firm, had insisted. "You need to be visible, Amara. Your designs are brilliant, but in this business visibility matters. Let people see you. Let them remember your face when they see your buildings." So Amara had gone. She'd nursed a single glass of champagne and made conversation with other architects, discussing load-bearing walls and sustainable materials with genuine enthusiasm. That's when she'd met Julian Sterling. He'd approached her during a discussion about the new Riverside development. She'd been explaining to a group of investors why the proposed design was structurally unsound. Her passion had made her forget to be nervous. She'd sketched on a cocktail napkin, showing the stress points, suggesting alternatives. "You're absolutely right," a smooth voice had said behind her. She turned to find one of the most handsome men she'd ever seen. Tall, with dark hair styled perfectly, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His smile was confident but not arrogant. His dark eyes focused on her with genuine interest. "Julian Sterling," he'd said, extending his hand. "And you are?" "Amara Bennett. I'm with Morrison and Associates." The architect. Not a question. He'd known. "I've been watching you tonight. You're the only person here actually talking about buildings instead of money." They'd talked for an hour. He'd seemed fascinated by her work. Asked intelligent questions. Listened when she spoke. When the gala ended, he'd asked for her number. "I'd like to take you to dinner," he'd said. "Somewhere we can actually hear each other talk. I want to know more about your vision for sustainable urban design." Amara had been flattered. Excited. A man like Julian Sterling interested in her and her work. It felt like recognition. Validation. Their first date had been at a small Italian restaurant in her neighborhood. Julian had been charming. Attentive. He'd asked about her childhood in Atlanta, her decision to move to the city for architecture school, her dreams for the future. "I want to design buildings that matter," she told him. "Not just glass towers for corporations. Real structures that serve communities. Affordable housing that's actually beautiful. Public spaces that bring people together." "That's remarkable," Julian had said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Most people in this city only care about profit. You care about legacy." The courtship had been intense. Julian sent flowers to her office. Called her every evening. Took her to restaurants she'd only read about. Introduced her to his world of wealth and influence. At first, Amara had been overwhelmed. She'd grown up middle class. Her father was a teacher, her mother a nurse. They'd taught her the value of hard work and integrity. This world of private cars and exclusive clubs felt foreign. But Julian had made it seem natural. "Easy. You belong here," he'd insisted. "Your talent, your intelligence, your beauty. You deserve this life." 3 months into their relationship, he'd proposed. They'd been at his penthouse, overlooking the city. He'd gotten down on one knee with a ring that must have cost 6 months of her salary. "Marry me, Amara. Let me give you the world." She'd said yes. How could she not? He was successful, handsome, attentive. He seemed to value her mind as much as her appearance. Her parents had flown in to meet him and been impressed by his polish and charm. "He's a good man," her father had said. "Successful. Stable. He'll take care of you." The wedding had been elaborate. Julian had insisted on inviting 300 guests. Most of them his business associates and society connections. Amara's small circle of friends and family had felt lost in the crowd. 2 days before the wedding, Martin had appeared with the prenup. "Just a formality," Julian had assured her when she'd hesitated. "Standard protection for both of us. I'm not worried about your intentions, but my lawyers insist." Amara had been busy with final preparations. Overwhelmed by the scale of the event. She'd skimmed the document while Martin explained it was standard language. She'd signed, trusting Julian. Trusting that their love was real. The first year of marriage had been an adjustment. Julian traveled frequently for business. Amara had continued working at Morrison and Associates, but the demands of being Julian's wife began interfering with her schedule. She'd missed meetings to attend charity luncheons. Left the office early for dinners with his clients. "It's important that you're there," Julian had said when she'd complained. "These people need to see me as stable. Family-oriented. You're part of my image." Part of his image. The phrase had bothered her, but she'd dismissed the concern. All marriages required compromise, right? By the second year, Julian had begun suggesting she leave Morrison and Associates. "You don't need to work," he'd said. "My schedule is demanding. I need you available to handle the social obligations. To be my partner in building my empire." Patricia had tried to talk her out of it. "Amara, you're on track for partnership here. Don't give up your career. Once you leave, it's hard to come back." But Julian had been persuasive. "You can always go back to architecture later. Right now I need you. Isn't that what marriage is about? Supporting each other?" So she'd resigned. Given up the career she'd worked so hard to build. Become Mrs. Julian Sterling full-time. That's when things had really started to change. Without her work to focus on, Amara had noticed things she'd been too busy to see before. The way Julian's eyes glazed over when she talked about anything that didn't concern him. How he introduced her to people as "my wife," without bothering to mention her background or education. The condescending tone when he corrected her in public. "It's Beethoven, not Mozart," he'd said at one dinner party, his voice dripping with amusement at her mistake. "Actually, I think Amara is right," their host had said quietly. "That is Mozart." Julian had smiled tightly and changed the subject. Later in the car he'd been cold. "Don't embarrass me like that again." "But I was right." "That's not the point. The point is not to contradict me in front of others. It makes me look weak." She'd started noticing other things too. The way he checked his phone constantly, angling it away from her. The late nights that became more frequent. The receipts she'd find in his suit pockets from restaurants he'd claimed to be too busy to visit. One night, unable to sleep, she'd picked up his phone from the nightstand. No password. He'd never felt the need to hide from her before. Or maybe he'd just been that confident she'd never look. The messages had been devastating. Multiple women. Conversations that made it clear these weren't isolated incidents but ongoing relationships. Some of the women she recognized from society events. Others were names she didn't know. She'd confronted him the next morning. He'd been eating breakfast, scrolling through the financial news on his tablet. "Are you cheating on me?" He'd looked up, barely surprised. "What brought this on?" "I saw your messages." He'd sighed. Set down the tablet. "Amara, you're being dramatic. Those are just friendships. Networking contacts. You don't understand how business works at this level. They're not networking contacts. They're women you're sleeping with. Look." His voice had been patient, like he was explaining something to a child. "Our marriage is about partnership. Stability. You have the life you always wanted. Beautiful home. Financial security. Social status. Don't ruin that by being insecure." She'd been speechless. He wasn't even denying it. He was telling her to accept it. "I could leave," she'd said quietly. "And go where?" He'd smiled then. Not cruelly but with absolute confidence. "Back to some struggling architecture firm? You gave that up, remember? You're Mrs. Julian Sterling now. That's your identity. Your career. You're not going to throw that away over some meaningless indiscretions." He'd been right in a way. She'd isolated herself. Let friendships fade. Given up her professional network. Become entirely dependent on him. So she'd stayed. Telling herself it would get better. That he'd change. That maybe she was overreacting. The emotional distance had grown. Julian became less careful about hiding his affairs. She'd find evidence everywhere. Lipstick on collars. Perfume that wasn't hers. Once, a piece of jewelry in his coat pocket, clearly meant for someone else. When she'd asked about it, he'd shrugged. "Anniversary gift for my assistant. She's been with me 5 years. It's appropriate." His assistant was a 24-year-old blonde named Candace who looked at Julian like he was a god. Amara had learned to play her role. The perfect wife. Smiling at parties. Managing the household. Pretending everything was fine. Some part of her had been waiting. For what she didn't know. Permission to leave? The courage to start over? That night at Corinthian, when Julian had said those words, she'd gotten her answer. Not permission or courage, but something better. Clarity. Cold, hard clarity about exactly who her husband was and what her marriage had been from the start. Not a fairy tale. A transaction. And she'd been the one paying the price. Sitting at her laptop now, 3 years of memories crystallized into a pattern she couldn't unsee. The courtship that had been too perfect. Too fast. The rush to marriage. The prenup she'd barely read. The systematic isolation from her career and independence. Julian hadn't married her out of pity. He'd married her because she'd been useful. Young enough to be attractive. Accomplished enough to be impressive. But not so successful that she wouldn't be willing to give it all up for him. He'd chosen her because he thought she'd be grateful. Compliant. Easy to control. He'd miscalculated. Amara closed her laptop and looked around the bedroom she'd decorated herself. The artwork she'd chosen. The soft blue walls she'd painted over Julian's objections. Small acts of rebellion he'd barely noticed because he'd stopped seeing her as a person years ago. Tomorrow she'd start the real work. But tonight she let herself feel the full weight of the betrayal. Not just his affairs or his cruelty at dinner. But the deeper betrayal of a marriage that had never been what she'd thought it was. She'd loved him once. Believed in him. built her life around him. Now she would take that life back. Every piece of it. And make him pay for every lie he'd ever told her. Monday morning, Amara woke before Julian. She lay still, listening to his breathing, steady and unconcerned. He had no idea what was coming. That was the advantage of being underestimated for 3 years. She slipped out of bed and made coffee, the routine so automatic she barely thought about it. Julian liked his coffee at exactly 7:15 a.m., black, in the expensive ceramic mug his company had given him. She'd been making it for him every morning since they married. Not anymore. Starting today he could make his own coffee. She poured herself a cup and took it to the guest room she'd converted into a study. Julian rarely came in here. It was her space, meaning it was beneath his notice. Sitting at the small desk, Amara opened her laptop and began her real work. First, she needed to understand her legal position. She pulled up the prenup she'd signed and read it carefully this time. The terms were worse than she'd remembered. In the event of divorce, she was entitled to nothing except a small lump sum. $50,000. Less than 1 year of the salary she'd given up at Morrison & Associates. The penthouse remained Julian's property. His business interests were protected. His assets untouchable. But there were clauses. Specific situations that voided the agreement. In the event of fraud, misrepresentation, or material breach of the marriage contract, including but not limited to infidelity, financial misconduct, or concealment of assets, this agreement may be challenged in court. The language was buried in page 7, probably inserted by Julian's lawyers as standard protection. They'd never expected it to be used against him. Amara took notes. She needed evidence. Documentation. A paper trail that proved Julian had violated the terms of their marriage. She started with the obvious, his affairs. She'd seen messages on his phone, but she needed copies. Screenshots. Names. Dates. Enough to establish a pattern of infidelity. Next, she needed to understand his business. Julian ran Sterling Enterprises, a real estate development company. He was always working on deals, talking about investments and acquisitions. Amara had listened to these conversations for years without really paying attention. Time to start paying attention. She spent the morning researching Sterling Enterprises online. The company had grown substantially in the 3 years since their marriage. New developments across the city. Partnerships with major investors. Julian's net worth had reportedly doubled. But some of the deals seemed questionable. Projects announced with great fanfare that never materialized. Investors listed on the company website that Amara didn't remember meeting at any social events. She made notes. Questions to investigate. Threads to pull. At noon her phone rang. Patricia Okonkwo's name appeared on the screen. Amara, Patricia's warm voice filled the study. I've been thinking about you. How are things? They'd kept in touch sporadically since Amara left Morrison & Associates. Lunch every few months. Brief calls. Patricia had been the only person from her old life who'd stayed consistent. I need to talk to you, Amara said. In person. Can we meet? Of course. Are you all right? I will be. But I need advice. Legal advice. There was a pause. I'll text you an address. Come at 2 o'clock. Don't tell anyone where you're going. The address turned out to be a small coffee shop in a neighborhood Amara had never visited. Patricia was already there when she arrived, sitting in a corner booth away from other customers. Sit, Patricia said, gesturing to the seat across from her. Tell me everything. So Amara did. She explained the dinner at Corinthian. Julian's cruel words. The years of affairs and condescension. The prenup that had trapped her. Her decision to leave and her need to do it right. Patricia listened without interrupting. At 63, she'd seen enough of life and business to not be easily shocked. Her dark brown skin was smooth, her gray hair cut short and professional. She wore a burgundy blazer and gold earrings. Everything about her radiated competence. When Amara finished, Patricia nodded slowly. First, I'm proud of you. It takes courage to see your situation clearly and decide to change it. Second, you're going to need a very good lawyer. Third, you're going to need to be patient and strategic. No emotional decisions. No confrontations until you're ready. I know. That's why I'm here. I don't know where to start. Patricia pulled out her phone and sent a text. I'm connecting you with someone. Nicole Chin. Best divorce attorney in the city. She's handled cases like yours before. High net worth individuals who think they're untouchable. I can't afford a good attorney. Julian controls all our accounts. Nicole will work with you on payment. She believes in helping women escape bad situations. Plus, once you win the case, you'll have the resources to pay her properly. If I win, you will. But you need evidence. Everything you can find. Financial records. Proof of infidelity. Any documents that show he defrauded you or violated the marriage contract. Amara nodded. His office. He keeps everything there. Financial documents. Contracts. He thinks I'm too stupid to understand any of it. Good. That's his mistake. But be careful. Don't get caught. Don't confront him. Just document. Photograph everything. Store copies somewhere he can't access. Patricia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Nicole can see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Here's her office address. Go alone. Don't tell Julian. Do you have money for a cab? I have a credit card. For household expenses. Use it. Start establishing financial independence. Open your own bank account if you can. They talked for another hour. Patricia asked detailed questions about Julian's business, his associates, his routines. She helped Amara create a plan. Most importantly, Patricia said as they prepared to leave, remember who you were before him. You're Amara Bennett. Brilliant architect. Talented designer. Strong woman. He made you forget that. Time to remember. That evening Julian came home late. Candace's perfume clung to his jacket. He didn't bother hiding it anymore. Dinner ready? He asked, barely looking at her. No, Amara said calmly. I wasn't sure when you'd be home, so I ate already. There's leftover pasta in the fridge if you're hungry. He frowned. You always have dinner ready. I was busy today. Busy with what? You don't work. The comment that would have hurt her a week ago now just rolled off. I had errands. Appointments. I have a life, Julian. He studied her for a moment, something like suspicion crossing his face. Then he shrugged. Whatever. I'll order something. He went to his office and closed the door. She heard him on the phone, laughing with someone. Probably Candace. Amara cleaned the kitchen, then went to the study. She pulled out a new notebook. Not digital. Nothing that could be hacked or accidentally discovered. Old-fashioned pen and paper. At the top of the first page, she wrote, Operation Exit. Beneath it, she began listing everything she needed to do. Meet with Nicole Chin. Photograph documents in Julian's office. Document all evidence of affairs. Research Sterling Enterprises finances. Contact old colleagues at Morrison & Associates. Open personal bank account. Find apartment. Prepare to rebuild career. It was a long list, but she'd complete every item. One by one. Methodically. The same way she'd approach designing a building. Foundation first. Then structure. Then the details that made it beautiful. Around midnight, she heard Julian's office door open. His footsteps in the hallway. He didn't come to the bedroom. Probably spending the night on the sofa in his office. He did that more often lately. Good. It made her work easier. Amara waited until she heard his breathing change, the soft snoring that indicated deep sleep. Then she crept to his office. The door was unlocked. She slipped inside. The room smelled like leather and expensive scotch. Julian's desk was covered with papers. Contracts. Financial statements. Email printouts. She pulled out her phone and began photographing everything. Page by page. Document by document. She worked quickly but carefully, making sure each image was clear and legible. One document caught her attention. A financial statement from Sterling Enterprises. It showed a major investment from someone named H. Winters. $10 million. But Amara had never heard Julian mention that name. Never met anyone named Winters at any of their social events. She photographed it, then kept searching. Found more documents about the Winters investment. Contracts. Agreements. Letters. Something was off. The language was vague. The terms unusual. This didn't look like a legitimate business investment. She took photos of everything, then carefully rearranged the papers exactly as she'd found them. Julian was careless, but she couldn't risk him noticing anything disturbed. Back in the study, she uploaded the photos to a secure cloud account she'd created that afternoon. Not one Julian knew about or could access. She organized them into folders. Dated them. Created a master spreadsheet tracking what she'd found. It was 3 a.m. when she finally stopped. Her eyes burned from staring at the screen. But she had something now. A starting point. Evidence. Tomorrow she'd meet Nicole Chin. Begin building her legal case. But tonight she'd taken the first real step. She thought about Julian, asleep in his office, completely unaware that his perfect, compliant wife was systematically documenting everything that would destroy him. He'd told his friends she was unwanted. That nobody else would have her. He was about to discover exactly how wrong he'd been. Nicole Chen's office was in a sleek high-rise downtown. The reception area had modern furniture and abstract art. Everything designed to project success and discretion. Amara signed in using a fake name Patricia had suggested. Beth Williams. Just in case anyone reported back to Julian about where she'd been. Nicole met her in a private conference room. She was in her 40s with sharp features and perfectly styled black hair. Her blue suit was immaculate. Her handshake firm. Patricia speaks highly of you, Nicole said, gesturing for Amara to sit. She says you need help leaving a difficult marriage. My husband is Julian Sterling. Nicole's expression didn't change. I'm familiar with Mr. Sterling's reputation, both in business and in his personal life. You've heard things? I hear everything in this city. Part of my job. Nicole opened a leather portfolio and clicked her pen. Tell me about your situation. Start from the beginning. Amara spent an hour explaining. The whirlwind courtship. The rushed prenup. The systematic erosion of her independence. Julian's affairs. His financial games. The dinner at Corinthian that had been her breaking point. Nicole took notes, asked clarifying questions and listened with complete focus. When Amara finished, Nicole sat back. You have a strong case for fraud and breach of contract. The prenup was signed under duress and with incomplete information. Your husband concealed his true character and intentions. That's grounds for invalidation. But I need proof. You do. Everything you can find. I'll need documentation of his infidelity. Financial records that show misconduct or hidden assets. Evidence that he misrepresented himself when you married. Amara pulled out her phone. I started collecting evidence last night. She showed Nicole the photographs from Julian's office. The financial statements. The mysterious Winters investment. Email chains about business deals that seemed questionable. Nicole studied each image carefully. Her eyes narrowed at the Winters documents. This is interesting. Very interesting. This investment structure looks like money laundering. See here? She pointed to specific clauses. Funds coming in from an offshore account. No clear paper trail of origin. Converting into real estate investments that inflate Sterling Enterprises' apparent value. Is that illegal? If it's what I think it is, yes. Very illegal. And very useful for your case. If your husband is engaged in financial crimes, the prenup becomes meaningless. Courts don't enforce contracts that enable criminal activity. Hope bloomed in Amara's chest for the first time in years. So I can actually get out? Get something fair? More than fair. If we play this right, you'll get a substantial settlement. Your husband has significant assets, and you're entitled to compensation for the career you gave up, the deception you endured, and the trauma of his behavior. They spent 2 more hours going over strategy. Nicole explained what Amara needed to collect. How to document everything. Where to store evidence. What mistakes to avoid. Most importantly, Nicole said as they wrapped up, don't tell him anything. Don't hint that you're unhappy. Don't threaten to leave. Just gather information. When we're ready, we'll hit him with everything at once. Give him no time to hide assets or prepare defenses. How long will this take? Weeks. Maybe a couple months. These things require patience. But based on what you've shown me today, I'm confident we'll win. Leaving Nicole's office, Amara felt lighter than she had in years. She had a plan. A professional on her side. A real path forward. Her phone buzzed. Text from Patricia. How did it go? Good. Really good. Thank you. Have dinner with me tonight. I have a proposition for you. They met at a small restaurant in Patricia's neighborhood. Over grilled fish and vegetables, Patricia got straight to the point. How would you feel about coming back to architecture? Amara nearly dropped her fork. What? Morrison and Associates need someone for a new project. Sustainable, affordable housing. Community-focused design. Exactly the kind of work you love. The partner who was going to lead it just accepted a position elsewhere. I recommended you. I haven't worked in 3 years, Patricia. My portfolio is outdated. My skills are still there. You have a degree from Howard. 3 successful projects. Natural talent. What you don't have is confidence. Julian took that from you. Time to get it back. Even if I wanted to, I can't. Julian would never allow it. Don't tell him. At least not at first. Come in as a consultant. Work from home. Once the divorce is underway, you'll have income. Independence. Proof that you can rebuild your career. Amara thought about it. Going back to work would mean defying Julian. Taking back part of herself she'd lost. But it was risky. If he found out before she was ready to leave? I see you thinking, Patricia said. Calculating risks. Here's what I know, you're miserable. You've been miserable for years. Yes, this is a risk. But staying with him is a bigger one. You're dying slowly in that marriage. This is your chance to start living again. What's the project? Patricia smiled. Low-income housing development. City partnership. The goal is to create affordable apartments that are actually beautiful, dignified. Places people want to live, not just warehouses for poor people. It needs someone who cares about the social impact. Someone who designs with heart. That's you. I'd have to update my portfolio. Research current building codes. I'm not sure I remember. You remember? It's like riding a bike. Come to the office tomorrow. I'll give you the project brief. You can decide if you want to take it. No pressure. But it wasn't no pressure. It was everything. A lifeline. A way back to herself. That night, Amara told Julian she was meeting an old college friend for lunch the next day. He barely looked up from his phone. Fine. Don't forget I have the Riverside Gala Friday. You need to get your dress fitted. Which dress? The silver one. I left it for alterations last week. Pick it up Thursday. He still thought she was his assistant. His property. Someone who existed only to serve his needs. I'll get it, she said. But she was already thinking about Friday. The Riverside Gala was a major event. Julian's business partners would all be there. Including Richard, who'd given her that calculating look at Corinthian. Maybe it was time to have a conversation with Richard. Find out what he knew about Sterling Enterprises. Plant some seeds of doubt about Julian's business practices. The next morning, Amara went to Morrison & Associates. The building was exactly as she remembered. Glass and steel. Modern but warm. She'd spent so many hours here. Late nights working on designs. Excited conversations about architecture and sustainability. Walking through the lobby felt like coming home. Patricia met her in the conference room. She'd brought the project lead, a young architect named Damon Hughes. He was in his early 30s with dark brown skin and bright, intelligent eyes. He wore a green button-down and jeans. Amara Bennett, he said, shaking her hand enthusiastically. I've seen your work. The Riverside Commons project? Beautiful. That public space integration was genius. She'd forgotten anyone had noticed her contributions. Julian had made her feel like her career had been insignificant. But Damon was right. Riverside Commons had been innovative. Smart design that served the community. They spent 3 hours reviewing the housing project. The site plans. The budget constraints. The city's requirements. The community's needs. Amara's mind clicked into gear. She started sketching. Asking questions. Suggesting modifications. Ideas flowed like they hadn't in years. This is amazing, Damon said, looking at her quick drawings. You're seeing solutions I hadn't considered. We should incorporate natural lighting here. And this courtyard concept would create real community space. It needs to feel welcoming, Amara explained. Not institutional. People living here should feel proud of their homes. Patricia watched from the corner, smiling. So, interested? Yes. The word came out without hesitation. Yes, I want to do this. Excellent. We'll start you as an independent consultant. Work from home until the divorce proceedings begin. Then we can bring you in-house. Amara left the office with a folder of materials and a contract. Real work. Her own project. Income that Julian didn't control. She felt alive for the first time in 3 years. That evening, while Julian was out at another mysterious business meeting, Amara set up a workspace in the study. Cleared the desk. Organized her materials. Opened her old design software and was relieved to find she still had access through her old license. She worked until midnight, sketching concepts for the housing project. Losing herself in the creative process. Remembering why she'd become an architect in the first place. Around 1 a.m., she heard Julian come home. His footsteps were unsteady. Drunk. She heard him fumbling with his keys, cursing softly. The apartment door opened and closed. More footsteps. A woman's laugh. Amara went to the hallway and looked. Julian had Candace with him. His assistant. They were pressed against the wall, kissing. He was touching her inappropriately. They were both too drunk to notice Amara standing 15 feet away. She pulled out her phone and took a video. Clear evidence. Time-stamped. Undeniable. They stumbled into Julian's office and closed the door. She could hear them laughing. Knocking things over. Amara went back to the study and uploaded the video to her secure cloud storage. Added it to her evidence file. noted the date and time in her spreadsheet. Then she went back to her architecture work. Let Julian and his mistress do whatever they wanted in the next room. She had more important things to focus on. Her escape was taking shape. Foundation in place. Structure rising. Soon it would be complete. Strong enough to stand on its own. Beautiful enough to be proud of. Julian thought he'd broken her. Made her dependent and grateful. He had no idea he'd actually set her free. Friday came too quickly. The Riverside Gala. Amara picked up the altered silver dress Julian had selected, though she'd already decided to wear something else. Something she'd bought 3 years ago and never worn because Julian said it made her look too bold. It was a deep blue gown. Form-fitting but elegant. When she tried it on at the store, the saleswoman had said, "You look powerful in this." That's why Julian had hated it. Tonight, power was exactly what she needed. She dressed carefully. Applied makeup with precision. Styled her hair in natural curls rather than the sleek updo Julian preferred. Wore the gold earrings her mother had given her for graduation. Looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked like herself again. Confident. Strong. Ready. Julian was already dressed when she emerged from the bedroom. He was adjusting his tie, looking at his phone. He glanced up, did a double take. "What are you wearing?" "A dress." "That's not the silver dress I picked out." "I know. I wanted to wear this one." His jaw tightened. "Amara, I specifically told you to wear the silver dress. This blue thing makes you look like myself. Difficult. It makes you look difficult. Go change." "No." The word hung in the air. She'd never directly refused him before. 3 years of compliance, and tonight she was saying no. "Excuse me?" "I said no, Julian. I'm wearing this dress. If you don't like it, you can go to the gala alone." For a moment she thought he might actually lose control. His face flushed. His hands clenched. But then he seemed to remember they had appearances to maintain. A gala to attend. Business partners to impress. "Fine," he said coldly. "Wear whatever you want. Just don't embarrass me." The ride to the gala was silent. Thomas drove while Julian stared out the window, radiating anger. Amara didn't care. Each small act of defiance felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. The gala was at the Grand Riverfront Hotel. Hundreds of guests in formal wear. Ice sculptures. String quartet. Champagne flowing freely. Julian's world in all its excessive glory. They entered together, and Julian immediately switched on his public persona. Charming smile. Confident stride. Hand on the small of Amara's back, possessive but appearing affectionate. "Julian, wonderful to see you," called out Mr. Hutchinson from across the room. The older man approached with his wife. "And Mrs. Sterling. You look lovely tonight." "Thank you," Amara said warmly. "How is your grandson? You mentioned he was starting college." Mrs. Hutchinson lit up. "How kind of you to remember. He's doing wonderfully. Studying engineering at—" While she talked, Amara noticed Julian's attention drifting. His eyes scanning the room. Looking for someone. She followed his gaze and spotted Candace near the bar, wearing a red dress that left little to the imagination. Julian excused himself. "Business to attend to. I'll find you later, darling." He walked straight to Candace. Amara watched them greet each other. Julian's hand on Candace's waist. Her smile intimate and knowing. "How long have you known?" Mrs. Hutchinson asked quietly. Amara turned back to the older woman. "Known what?" "About your husband's affairs. I saw your face just now. That wasn't surprise. That was resignation." For a moment, Amara considered deflecting. Playing the role. But Mrs. Hutchinson's eyes were kind. Understanding. Not judgmental. "A while now," Amara admitted. "My first husband was like that," Mrs. Hutchinson said. "Thought I was too stupid or too dependent to leave. I proved him wrong. Divorced him. Started my own business. Met my current husband 5 years later. Best decision I ever made." "How did you find the courage?" "I realized the only thing scarier than leaving was staying. Then waking up 20 years later and realizing I'd wasted my entire life on someone who didn't value me." They talked for a few more minutes, then Mrs. Hutchinson squeezed Amara's hand. "Whatever you decide to do, dear, I hope you choose yourself." Amara excused herself and moved through the gala. She wasn't looking for Julian. She was looking for Richard. She found him near the windows overlooking the river. Alone. Nursing a whiskey. "Beautiful view," she said, approaching. Richard turned. "Mrs. Sterling. You're looking particularly confident tonight." "That's new." "Is it?" "At Corinthian you looked like a woman planning something." Tonight, you look like a woman executing a plan. It's an interesting transformation. She studied him. Richard was sharper than most of Julian's associates. More observant. She'd never paid much attention to him before, but now she wondered what he'd noticed over the years. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. What do you really think of my husband's business practices?" Richard's eyebrows rose. "That's a direct question. I'm tired of indirect ones." He smiled slightly. "Fair enough. Honestly, I think Julian is reckless. He takes shortcuts, cuts corners, makes deals that look good on paper but collapse under scrutiny. I've partnered with him on 2 projects and both made me nervous." "Why do you continue working with him?" "Because he's charismatic, connected, and sometimes his gambles pay off." Richard paused. "Why are you asking? Have you heard of H. Winters?" Richard's expression changed, became guarded. "Where did you hear that name?" "I see documents sometimes, lying around. I'm curious about the investment." "Mrs. Sterling." Richard looked around, checking that no one was close enough to overhear. "If you're asking about Winters, you're getting into dangerous territory. That money isn't clean. And if anyone starts investigating Sterling Enterprises' finances, that investment is going to raise serious questions. You know this." "I suspect it. I've distanced myself from Julian's recent projects because I don't want to be implicated when things fall apart. And they will fall apart. They always do when someone gets too confident." Amara absorbed this. Richard was essentially confirming what Nicole suspected. The Winters investment was dirty money, which meant Julian was involved in something criminal. "Thank you for your honesty," she said. "Can I give you some advice?" Richard asked. "Whatever you're planning, be smart about it. Julian doesn't handle being crossed well. Make sure you're protected before you make any moves." "I will." She left Richard and continued circulating. Talked to other business associates. Listened to their conversations about deals and investments. Picked up information about Julian's ventures. Mental notes about who was involved in what. Around 11, Julian found her. He was drunk. Sloppy. His tie loosened. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "Networking. Isn't that why we come to these events? You're my wife. You stay by my side. Actually, you told me to entertain your guests while you conducted business. That's what I've been doing." He grabbed her arm. "Don't get smart with me." She looked pointedly at his hand. "Let go." "Or what?" "Or I'll make a scene. Right here. In front of everyone. Is that what you want?" For a tense moment, they stared at each other. Then Julian released her arm. "We're leaving," he said. "I'll get my coat." In the car, Julian ranted. About the gala. The investors. Some deal that was taking too long to close. Amara let him talk, only half listening. She was thinking about her conversation with Richard. About the Winters investment. About how much ammunition she was accumulating. When they got home, Julian went straight to his office. Slammed the door. She heard him on the phone, his voice angry. Amara went to the study and pulled out her evidence log. Updated it with everything she'd learned tonight. Richard's confirmation about the dirty money. The public display with Candace. Julian's rough handling of her arm, which had left a small bruise she'd photographed immediately. Her phone buzzed. Text from Patricia. "How was the gala?" "Productive. Can we meet tomorrow?" "My office. 10 a.m. Amara worked until 3 in the morning. Organizing evidence. Building her timeline. Strengthening her case. Around 4, she heard Julian's office door open. His footsteps in the hallway. But he didn't go to the bedroom. He went to the guest room. She heard the door close. They weren't even pretending anymore. The marriage was a shell. They were roommates. Strangers sharing space while maintaining a public facade. Good. It would make leaving easier. Saturday morning, Amara met Patricia at Morrison & Associates. The office was quiet on the weekend. Just a few architects working on deadlines. "You look tired," Patricia observed. "I've been busy. Gathering evidence. Working on the housing project. Planning my exit. I'm impressed by your focus. But I'm also worried about you. Are you taking care of yourself?" "I'm fine." "You're not. You've been living in survival mode for 3 years. Now you're in planning mode. But eventually you'll need to actually process what you've been through. Feel the emotions. That's going to be hard." Later, Amara said, "Right now, I need to stay focused." "Okay. But when the time comes, don't try to handle it alone. Promise me." "I promise." They reviewed Amara's progress on the housing project. Her designs were strong. Innovative. Exactly what the city needed. The preliminary presentation is in 2 weeks, Patricia said. City officials, community representatives, the neighborhood association. They need to approve the design before we move forward. I'll be ready. You'll need to present. Be the face of the project. Are you comfortable with that? Amara thought about it. 2 weeks from now, would she still be living with Julian? Would the divorce proceedings have started? Would he know what she was planning? I'll figure it out, she said. The next week was a blur of activity. Amara refined her designs. Met with Nicole to review evidence. Photographed more documents from Julian's office. Documented more instances of his affairs. She also started looking at apartments. Small places in safe neighborhoods. Nothing fancy but her own space. Independence. Julian barely noticed her absence. He was distracted by business problems. Something was going wrong with one of his deals. She heard him on the phone, his voice stressed. Arguing with investors. Wednesday evening, while Julian was out, Amara received an unexpected visitor. The doorman called up. Mrs. Sterling, there's a woman here to see you. Says her name is Stephanie Waters. Says it's urgent. Amara didn't know anyone named Stephanie. Send her up. The woman who appeared at her door was in her mid-30s. Blonde. Tired looking. Carrying a folder. Mrs. Sterling? Thank you for seeing me. I know this is unexpected, but I need to talk to you about your husband. Come in. Stephanie entered and looked around the penthouse. Nice place. He really knows how to spend money, doesn't he? Other people's money usually. Who are you? I'm a journalist. I've been investigating Sterling Enterprises for 6 months. Financial irregularities. Questionable deals. I think your husband is running a sophisticated fraud scheme. And I think you might have information that could help me prove it. Amara studied the woman carefully. Why would I help you? Because I think you're planning to leave him. And having his crimes exposed publicly would help your case. Make him less sympathetic. More vulnerable. Stephanie opened her folder. I know about the Winters investment. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the shell companies he uses to move money around. What I don't have is hard evidence. Documents. Internal communications. The kind of things that might be lying around his home office. That's quite an assumption. Is it? Mrs. Sterling, I've talked to his previous business partners. His ex-associates. I've built a profile of Julian Sterling. And part of that profile is how he treats his wives. Wives? Plural? Stephanie pulled out a photograph. Did you know Julian was married before? Briefly. 8 years ago. Her name was Rebecca Thompson. The marriage lasted 10 months. She left with nothing. Signed a prenup just like yours. She tried to challenge it, but she didn't have enough evidence. Amara took the photo. A young woman with auburn hair. Pretty. Scared looking. He never mentioned a previous marriage. Of course not. That would have raised questions. Made you cautious. He's refined his approach since Rebecca. Gets better at hiding his true nature with each relationship. Amara felt sick. She wasn't even his first victim. Just the latest in a pattern. What do you want from me? She asked. Access. Information. When you're ready to leave, give me copies of whatever evidence you've collected. I'll write the expose. His business will collapse. He'll face criminal charges. And you'll be free. I need to think about this. Think fast. My deadline is in 3 weeks. With or without your help, I'm running this story. But it'll be much stronger with your cooperation. Stephanie left her contact information and departed. Amara stood in the empty penthouse, holding the photo of Rebecca Thompson, Julian's first wife. The woman he'd used and discarded before Amara. History repeating itself. Except this time Julian had miscalculated. This time his wife wasn't going to disappear quietly. This time he was going to pay for everything he'd done. Amara spent the next week preparing. Not just gathering evidence but planning the perfect moment to strike. Julian had taught her one thing: timing matters. Control the narrative. Choose the battlefield. Nicole Chin advised caution. We have enough evidence. We can file for divorce and fight it out in court. You don't need a public confrontation. Yes, I do, Amara said. He humiliated me publicly at Corinthian. In front of his friends. Told them I was unwanted. That nobody would have me. I need to answer that. Not in a courtroom. In the same kind of setting where he hurt me. Patricia understood. You need closure. Vindication. Not just legally but emotionally. Exactly. The opportunity came 2 weeks later. Julian was hosting a dinner at the penthouse. The same group from Corinthian. Richard and Diane. The Hutchinsons. Martin. And several new potential investors Julian was courting. He'd informed Amara about the dinner 3 days before. I need you to play hostess. Impress these people. Think you can handle that? Of course, she'd said sweetly. I'll make sure everything is perfect. She spent those 3 days preparing. Not the menu or the decor, though she arranged those too. But her real preparation was different. She contacted Stephanie Waters. Coordinated timing. Made copies of all her evidence and stored them in multiple secure locations. She also contacted Rebecca Thompson, Julian's first wife, the woman in the photograph. They'd spoken by phone and Rebecca had been hesitant at first. Suspicious. But when Amara explained what she was planning, Rebecca had agreed to help. I've waited 8 years for someone to make him pay, Rebecca said. Tell me what you need. The night of the dinner, Amara dressed carefully. Not the clothes Julian would choose. The green dress she'd been designing for. Bold. Confident. Beautiful. She wore her mother's earrings. Applied makeup that made her look powerful rather than demure. When Julian saw her, he frowned. That dress is too bright. You'll draw attention away from the business discussion. That's a shame, she said. Because I'm not changing. He didn't have time to argue. Guests were arriving. He had to play the perfect host. Amara greeted everyone warmly. Served appetizers and drinks. Made small talk. Laughed at jokes. The perfect hostess. Just like Julian expected. Dinner was elaborate. Catered by the expensive restaurant Julian preferred. Wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Everything designed to impress. As they ate, Julian held court. Talking about his latest development project. The Riverside Tower. A luxury high-rise that would transform the waterfront. We're looking at exceptional returns, he told the potential investors. This area is ready for upscale development. Luxury condos starting at $2 million each. The units are already selling. Richard exchanged a glance with Amara. She knew what he was thinking. Julian's claims sounded exaggerated. Probably were. Sounds ambitious, one of the new investors said. What about financing? Fully secured. Multiple investors committed. Breaking ground next month. More lies. Amara had seen the actual project documents. The financing was shaky. Several promised investors had backed out. The timeline was fictional. After dinner they moved to the living room. Coffee and dessert. Amara served everything herself, gracious and attentive. Waiting for the right moment. It came when Richard mentioned Corinthian. That was a lovely evening a few weeks ago. We should do it again. Absolutely, Diane agreed. Though I seem to recall the conversation getting a bit personal. She glanced at Amara. Someone made some rather unkind comments about marriage. The room went quiet. Everyone remembered. Julian's words about marrying Amara out of pity. About nobody else wanting her. Julian laughed uncomfortably. Just jokes. Nothing serious. Were they jokes? Amara asked. Her voice was calm. Steady. She set down her coffee cup. Amara? Because I've been thinking about that evening. About what you said. And I realized something. You weren't joking. You meant every word. This isn't the time. When is the time, Julian? When you're making similar comments to these lovely people after I leave the room? When you're explaining to your next wife how pathetic I was? The investors looked confused. The Hutchinsons uncomfortable. Martin tried to stand, probably to suggest they all leave, but Amara raised her hand. Please stay. You should hear this. All of you. Because you're about to invest in Julian's business. Or already have. And you deserve to know who you're dealing with. Amara, stop. Julian's voice was sharp. Threatening. No. I've stopped for 3 years. Stopped speaking. Stopped questioning. Stopped being myself. That ends tonight. She walked to the television mounted on the wall. Pulled out a small remote. The screen flickered to life. What are you doing? Julian demanded. Showing everyone the truth. The first image appeared. A financial document. The Winters investment. $10 million from an offshore account. This is one of Julian's major investments, Amara explained. Except Winters doesn't exist. It's a shell company. The money is being laundered through Sterling Enterprises. Dirty money made to look legitimate through real estate deals. Julian lunged toward her, but Richard stepped between them. Let her finish, Richard said quietly. The next image. Email exchanges between Julian and someone named Victor. Discussing percentages. Kickbacks. Ways to hide the money trail. Julian's been running this scheme for at least 2 years. possibly longer. Taking money from questionable sources. Using it to inflate his company's apparent value. Then selling stakes to legitimate investors. She looked at the new investors. Like you. Their faces paled. More images. Text messages between Julian and Candace. Explicit. Planning meetings at hotels. Discussing ways to hide the affair from the wife. My husband has been unfaithful throughout our marriage. Multiple women. His assistant is just the most recent. Julian was trying to reach the television. To turn it off. But Martin, his own lawyer, held him back. Don't, Martin said. You're making it worse. The final set of images. The prenup. The marriage certificate. And then the documentation of Julian's previous marriage to Rebecca Thompson. Julian never told me he'd been married before. That he'd used the exact same tactics. Rushed courtship. Quick marriage. Prenup signed under pressure. Then systematic emotional abuse until his wife left with nothing. This is slander, Julian snarled. You'll pay for this. Will I? Because I've given copies of all this evidence to my lawyer. To the district attorney's office. And to Stephanie Waters from the Financial Observer. She's running an expose on Sterling Enterprises. It publishes tomorrow morning. The room erupted. The investors demanding answers. The Hutchinsons gathering their things to leave. Martin trying to do damage control. Amara turned off the television. I'm filing for divorce. I'm challenging the prenup on grounds of fraud and breach of contract. And I'm making sure everyone in this city knows exactly who Julian Sterling really is. She looked at Julian. He was red-faced, shaking with rage. She felt nothing. No fear. No regret. Just cold satisfaction. You said nobody else wanted me, she said quietly. You were wrong. I didn't need anybody else to want me. I needed to want myself. And now I do. She walked to the bedroom. Packed a bag with essentials. Documents. Laptop. Clothes. Everything else could wait. When she returned to the living room, most of the guests had left. Only Richard and Martin remained. Julian sat on the sofa, head in his hands. I'll destroy you for this, he said without looking up. You already tried. It didn't work. She walked to the door. Thomas was waiting in the lobby with a car. Patricia had arranged it. Everything planned. Everything coordinated. Behind her, she heard Julian yelling. Demanding she come back. Threatening legal action. But his voice faded as she stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. Amara looked at her reflection in the polished metal. She was smiling. For 3 years she'd been silent. Compliant. Diminished. Tonight she'd taken her power back. In front of witnesses. With evidence. With precision. Julian had tried to break her. Instead he'd freed her. And now his entire world was about to collapse. The penthouse Patricia had arranged was small but comfortable. 1 bedroom. Modern kitchen. Large windows overlooking a quiet street. Amara moved in the morning after the dinner party with 2 suitcases and a sense of relief so profound it felt physical. She didn't sleep that first night. She sat by the window watching the city lights, waiting for the Financial Observer to hit the stands. At 6 a.m. her phone buzzed. Text from Stephanie Waters. It's live. Front page. Amara pulled up the article online. The headline was brutal. Sterling Enterprises, a house built on fraud and lies. Stephanie had done thorough work. The article detailed everything. The Winters investment and its connection to money laundering. The shell companies. The inflated property values. The pattern of deception going back years. And yes, Julian's treatment of his wives. Rebecca Thompson was quoted. So were former business partners who distanced themselves after becoming suspicious. Even Richard had provided anonymous confirmation of irregularities. By 8 a.m. the story was everywhere. Business news networks. Social media. The city was talking about nothing else. Amara's phone rang. Nicole Chin. Have you seen it? Yes. Julian's lawyers are already trying to do damage control. They've filed a motion for an emergency hearing, claiming you stole confidential documents. But honestly, that's the least of his problems. The district attorney's office called me this morning. They're opening a criminal investigation. How long will that take? Months. Maybe longer. But it works in our favor. The prenup is definitely invalid now. We're filing our counter-motion this afternoon. We should have a divorce hearing scheduled within the week. After Nicole hung up, Amara made coffee and tried to process what was happening. She'd expected fallout. But the speed and intensity of it was overwhelming. Her phone rang again. Patricia. You okay? I think so. The office is getting calls. Reporters wanting to interview you. Julian's lawyers trying to find you. You need to stay quiet. Let your attorney handle everything. I will. Good. Also, the city officials want to move up the housing project presentation. They love your designs. They want to announce it this week as a positive news story. Something to balance all the negative press about Sterling. This week? I'm not ready. You are. You're more ready than you think. Come by the office this afternoon. We'll prepare. Amara spent the morning reviewing her presentation materials. The designs were strong. She knew that. But standing in front of city officials and community members while her personal life was front-page news felt daunting. At 2 p.m. she went to Morrison and Associates. Damon Hughes met her in the conference room with a smile. You're famous, he said. In a good way. People are calling you brave. A whistleblower. Someone who stood up to a powerful man. I don't feel brave. I feel exhausted. That's normal. But your work is speaking for itself. Look at this. He showed her social media posts. Architects praising her designs. Community activists celebrating the housing project. People she'd never met expressing support. You're not alone in this, Damon said. A lot of people are rooting for you. They spent 3 hours refining the presentation. Patricia joined them, offering feedback and encouragement. By evening, Amara felt more confident. The work was good. That's what mattered. She returned to her new apartment and found a note slipped under her door. No name. Just an address and a time. 8 p.m. A restaurant across town. She almost ignored it. But something made her curious. She took a cab to the address. The restaurant was quiet. Upscale but not ostentatious. Richard sat at a corner table, waiting. Thank you for coming, he said as she sat down. I wasn't sure you would. Why did you want to meet? To apologize. And to explain. I've known about Julian's schemes for over a year. I suspected even longer. I should have said something. Done something. Instead, I protected myself and let him continue hurting people. Why are you telling me this now? Because watching you at that dinner party made me realize how much I'd compromised. You had more courage in 5 minutes than I've had in 5 years. I'm going to cooperate fully with the investigation. Provide whatever evidence I have. It won't make up for my silence, but it's a start. They talked for an hour. Richard explained the breadth of Julian's schemes. The investors he'd defrauded. The partners he'd betrayed. The systematic pattern of lies. He's going to prison, Richard said. Even if he avoids the financial crimes somehow, the fraud is undeniable. He's finished. Amara felt no satisfaction. Just a weary acceptance. I don't want revenge. I just want to move on. You will. You're already doing it. That housing project is brilliant, by the way. Patricia showed me the designs. You're going to change lives with that work. As Amara walked home, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something made her pick up. Amara? A woman's voice. Unfamiliar. Yes. This is Candace. Julian's? I don't know what to call myself. We need to talk. I don't think we do. Please. Just 10 minutes. There's something you need to know. Against her better judgment, Amara agreed to meet the next morning. A coffee shop. Public. Safe. Candace looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back messily. She was younger than Amara had realized. Maybe 25. She looked scared. Thank you for meeting me, Candace said. I know you have no reason to listen to me. You're right. But I'm here. So talk. I didn't know. About his wife before you. About the fraud. I thought I was stupid. I thought I was special. That he actually cared about me. What do you want, Candace? To apologize. And to warn you. Julian's not handling this well. He's talking about making you pay. I don't know what that means, but he's angry in a way I've never seen. You need to be careful. Did he send you here? No. He doesn't know I'm talking to you. But I've seen texts on his phone. Conversations with people I don't recognize. He's planning something. Amara studied the younger woman. She looked genuinely frightened. What else? The embezzlement investigation. They think I was helping him. I wasn't. I just signed things he told me to sign. Moved money he told me to move. I didn't understand what I was doing. That's not my problem. I know. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. For everything. I was young and stupid and I believed his lies. After Candace left, Amara called Nicole. Told her about the warning. I'll file for a restraining order, Nicole said. We have grounds. His threatening behavior. The history of control. The court will grant it. The restraining order was issued that afternoon. Julian was legally prohibited from contacting Amara or coming within 500 feet of her. That evening, Amara got a call from the district attorney's office. They wanted her to come in for an interview, provide testimony about what she'd witnessed, help build their case. She agreed. Not because she wanted revenge, but because it was the right thing to do. Other people had been hurt by Julian's schemes. They deserved justice too. The week passed in a blur. The housing project presentation was a success. City officials approved the design. Community members applauded. Local news covered it as a positive story about innovation and social responsibility. Amara was offered a full-time position at Morrison & Associates. Not just as a consultant but as a partner-track architect. Patricia made the offer official in front of the entire firm. "You've reminded us what this work is really about," Patricia said. "Not just buildings but impact, community, dignity. We'd be honored to have you back." Amara accepted. For the first time in years she felt like she was where she belonged. The divorce hearing was scheduled. Julian's lawyers tried every tactic to delay. But the evidence was overwhelming. The prenup was invalidated. Amara was awarded a substantial settlement. Enough to be financially secure while she rebuilt her career. Julian's business collapsed. Investors pulled out. Partners sued. The city revoked permits for several of his projects. Sterling Enterprises filed for bankruptcy. Candace was charged with minor financial crimes but was offered a plea deal in exchange for testimony against Julian. She took it. Through it all, Amara kept working. Designing buildings. Attending meetings. Slowly rebuilding the life she'd lost. Some days were hard. She'd find herself crying unexpectedly. Angry at the years she'd wasted. Grieving for the person she'd been before Julian. But mostly she felt free. What? Like she'd been carrying a crushing weight for 3 years and had finally set it down. Patricia checked on her regularly. "How are you really doing?" "Better," Amara said honestly. "Some days are harder than others. But I'm remembering who I am. And I like her. She's worth liking. Strong. Talented. Brave. I don't feel brave. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. You did that. You're still doing it." 2 months after leaving Julian, Amara attended a gallery opening. An architecture exhibit featuring innovative affordable housing designs. Her project was included. She stood in front of the display showing her work. The community-focused courtyards. The natural lighting solutions. The dignity built into every design choice. A young woman approached. "Are you Amara Bennett?" "Yes. I read about you. About what you did. Standing up to your husband. Exposing his crimes. My sister was in a similar situation. Your story gave her courage to leave. She got out 2 weeks ago. Started over. She wanted me to thank you." Amara felt tears prick her eyes. "Tell her I'm proud of her." "I will. And thank you. For showing us that it's possible to rebuild. That we're not defined by the people who tried to diminish us." Walking home that night, Amara realized something. She'd been so focused on escaping Julian that she hadn't thought much about what came after. But now, standing on the other side of it all, she could see clearly. She wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. Building a career. Creating meaningful work. Helping others through her designs and her example. Julian had tried to destroy her. Instead, he'd forced her to discover her own strength. To remember her worth. To reclaim her life. And that, more than any legal victory, was her triumph. 3 months after leaving Julian, Amara stood in front of a room full of architecture students at her alma mater, Howard University. Patricia had arranged the guest lecture. "You have a story these students need to hear," she'd said. "Not just about design but about resilience." The students sat in tiered seats, notebooks open, eyes attentive. Most were in their early 20s. Hopeful. Ambitious. Believing the world was full of possibilities. Amara had been like them once. She wanted them to stay that way. But she also wanted them to be smarter than she'd been. "I graduated from this program 11 years ago," she began. "I had a clear vision for my career. Community-focused architecture. Buildings that serve people, not just profits. For a while, I followed that path. I worked hard. Designed projects I was proud of. Built a reputation." She paused. The students waited. "Then I met someone who convinced me that my career was less important than supporting his. That my dreams should take a back seat to his ambitions. And for 3 years I believed him. I gave up my work. My independence. Myself." She saw recognition on some faces. Understanding. Others looked confused, probably wondering what this had to do with architecture. Here's what I learned, Amara continued. Your work matters. Not because of money or status, but because it reflects who you are. Buildings outlast us. They're our legacy. When you compromise your vision for someone else's approval, you're not just hurting yourself. You're depriving the world of what only you can create. She spent the next hour discussing the housing project, showing designs, explaining choices. The students asked excellent questions. They were engaged, excited, inspired. Afterward, a young woman approached. Her dark brown skin glowed. Natural hair in long braids. She wore a green jacket and carried a worn portfolio. Miss Bennett? I'm Taylor. I just wanted to say, your story means a lot. My boyfriend keeps telling me I should give up architecture. That it's too hard. That I should do something more practical. But watching you talk about your work, seeing what you've accomplished, I think I need to trust myself. You do, Amara said firmly. Your boyfriend doesn't get to define your worth or your potential. Only you do. Taylor smiled. Can I show you something? She opened her portfolio. The designs were raw but brilliant. A community center with innovative use of natural materials. A library that doubled as a neighborhood gathering space. Work that showed real thought about social impact. These are exceptional, Amara said. You have talent. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Could I get your contact information? Maybe I could send you my work sometimes. Get feedback? Amara gave her a business card. Email me. I'd be happy to mentor you. Driving back to the city, Amara thought about Taylor. About herself at that age. About the roads not taken because someone else's voice had been louder than her own. Never again. Her phone rang. Nicole Chin. Good news? Julian's criminal trial date is set. 6 months from now. The prosecutor is confident about conviction. Multiple charges. Financial fraud. Money laundering. He's looking at serious prison time. How's he doing? Not well. His bail conditions are strict. He's living in a small apartment. Most of his assets are frozen pending the criminal case and the civil suits from defrauded investors. His reputation is destroyed. No one will work with him. Amara felt a pang of something. Not sympathy exactly, but awareness that a life was being dismantled. Even a life built on lies. And Candace? She testified before the grand jury. Her cooperation is helping the case. She'll probably get probation and community service. She made bad choices, but she's young. She can recover. Good. I don't want her destroyed. Just held accountable. That's generous of you. Most people in your position would want blood. I wanted freedom. I got it. That's enough. After hanging up, Amara stopped at her favorite coffee shop. The one near Morrison and Associates where she'd started going during lunch breaks. The barista knew her order now. Smiled when she came in. Small connections. Normal life. She was finishing her coffee when someone sat down across from her. Rebecca Thompson. Julian's first wife. I hope this isn't weird, Rebecca said. I was in the neighborhood. Saw you through the window. Thought maybe we could talk. Of course. Rebecca looked different than in the photograph Stephanie had shown Amara. Healthier. Happier. Her auburn hair was cut short. She wore comfortable clothes. A blue sweater. Jeans. No effort to impress anyone. I wanted to thank you, Rebecca said, for doing what I couldn't. Standing up to him. Making him face consequences. You tried. The circumstances were different. I was weak. Scared. I let him silence me. You survived. That's not weakness. They talked for an hour. Sharing stories. Recognizing patterns in Julian's behavior. Finding dark humor in the similar tactics he'd used on both of them. Have you dated anyone since him? Rebecca asked. No. I'm not ready. Maybe someday. Right now I'm focused on my work. Rebuilding my career. Remembering who I am outside of that relationship. Smart. I rushed into another relationship too fast. Trying to prove I was desirable. That Julian was wrong about me. It was a disaster. Took me years to actually heal. How are you now? Better. I'm a teacher. High school art. I love it. I'm single by choice. Happy. It took time, but I got there. Rebecca reached across the table and squeezed Amara's hand. You'll get there too. And you'll be stronger for it. The housing project broke ground on a crisp October morning. Amara stood at the site wearing a hard hat and a red jacket, watching as construction crews prepared the foundation. City officials gave speeches. Community leaders expressed gratitude. Patricia praised Amara's vision. Photographers documented everything. How does it feel? Damon asked, standing beside her. Surreal. This is real. This is happening. People will live here. Build lives here. Because of designs I created. You should be proud. I am. Not just of the building but of what it represents. Proof that I'm still me. Still capable. Julian tried to make me forget that. But I didn't. I couldn't. The project would take 18 months to complete. Amara would oversee every phase. Make sure the execution matched the vision. It was the kind of work she'd dreamed about in architecture school. Meaningful. Impactful. Hers. Weekends became her own again. She took long walks through the city. Visited galleries. Reconnected with old friends she'd neglected during her marriage. One Saturday her parents visited from Atlanta. They'd been supportive during the divorce but worried. Her mother kept calling to make sure she was eating properly. Her father wanted to track down Julian and have a conversation. They took her to dinner at a small restaurant she chose. Not expensive. Not trying to impress. Just good food and warm conversation. You look different, her mother observed. Lighter. Happier. I feel different. I feel like myself again. We're proud of you, baby, her father said. What you did took courage. Standing up to a powerful man. Starting over. Not everyone could do that. I had help. Patricia. Nicole. Rebecca. Other people who believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. Still, her mother said, you're the one who decided to leave. Who chose yourself. That's the hardest part. After they left, Amara returned to her apartment. Small but hers. Decorated with furniture she'd chosen. Art that spoke to her. Books she loved. No compromises. No one else's opinion mattering more than her own. She opened her laptop and looked at new project proposals. Morrison and Associates was growing. Her work was generating attention. Other firms wanted to collaborate. She had options. Opportunities. A future she was building herself. Her phone buzzed. Text from Taylor, the student from Howard. Just wanted to update you. I broke up with my boyfriend. Scary but right. Thank you for showing me what's possible. Amara smiled and typed back. Proud of you. Focus on your work. The rest will follow. She meant it. Work was the foundation. Everything else built on that. Relationships. Happiness. Security. All of it required knowing your own worth first. Julian had tried to steal that from her. Made her forget her value. Told her she was lucky anyone wanted her. That she'd be nothing without him. But he'd been wrong. She was everything without him. She always had been. She just needed to remember. Some nights she still had moments of doubt. Wondered if she'd overreacted. She should have stayed. Tried harder to make the marriage work. Then she'd look at her designs. The housing project taking shape. The grateful faces of community members. The students she was mentoring. The life she was building. And she'd know with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Leaving Julian hadn't been giving up. It had been waking up. Choosing life over existence. Joy over compliance. Herself over someone else's limited vision of who she should be. And every day since that choice she'd become more fully herself. More confident. More capable. More complete. Julian Sterling had been a chapter in her life. A painful one. A lesson in what she wouldn't tolerate. But he wasn't her story. He was barely a footnote. Her story was the buildings she'd design. The community she'd serve. The students she'd mentor. The life she'd create on her own terms. That was the real revenge. Not destroying him, though that had happened anyway. But building something so meaningful, so beautiful, so entirely hers that his cruelty became irrelevant. A brief darkness in a life full of light. She was Amara Bennett. Architect. Designer. Survivor. Creator. And she was just getting started. 6 months passed quickly. The housing project was progressing ahead of schedule. Amara had designed 2 additional buildings for Morrison and Associates. Her reputation was growing beyond the city. Architecture publications featured her work. Universities invited her to speak. She'd built a life that felt authentic. Meaningful. Hers. Then came the notification. Julian's trial was starting. The prosecutor wanted Amara to testify. Not about the financial crimes. Other witnesses would handle that. But about the pattern of deception. The prenup signed under pressure. The manipulation. The context that showed Julian's character. You don't have to do this, Nicole said. We've already won the divorce settlement. His criminal conviction doesn't change that. I know. But other people invested in his schemes. They deserve justice. And I need to face him one more time. Show him I'm not afraid anymore. The courthouse was downtown. Modern building. Security checks. Crowds of reporters outside. Julian's trial had become a spectacle. A story about greed and deception. The fall of a man who'd seemed untouchable. Amara wore a burgundy suit. Professional. Powerful. She'd learned that clothes weren't just fashion. They were armor. A statement of intent. In the courtroom, she saw Julian for the first time since the dinner party. He looked smaller somehow. Diminished. His expensive suit couldn't hide the stress. The weight loss. The fear in his eyes. He glanced at her. For a moment their eyes met. She felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. Just a distant awareness that this person had once controlled her life. And didn't anymore. The prosecutor was a sharp woman named Angela Torres. She'd built her career on financial crimes. Knew how to make complex fraud understandable to juries. Ms. Bennett, Angela began after Amara was sworn in. You were married to the defendant for 3 years? Yes. During that time, did you have access to his financial records? Limited access. He kept most business documents in his office. I wasn't supposed to look at them. But you did look. Eventually. Why? Because I started noticing inconsistencies. Meetings with investors he claimed to have that I'd never met. Properties he said were selling that seemed empty. I wanted to understand what was really happening. What did you find? Amara described the Winters investment. The shell companies. The movement of money through offshore accounts. She kept her testimony factual. Unemotional. Just presenting evidence. Julian's lawyer tried to discredit her during cross-examination. Isn't it true, Ms. Bennett, that you were angry at your husband? That you accessed these documents illegally as part of a vendetta? No. I was concerned. And the documents were in our shared home. I had every legal right to look at them. But you admit you were planning to divorce him? Yes. Because of his affairs and his treatment of me. The financial crimes were separate. I reported them because they were illegal, not because I was angry. The prosecutor called other witnesses. Rebecca Thompson testified about Julian's pattern of deception. Richard explained the investment schemes. Accountants detailed the money laundering. Defrauded investors described their losses. The evidence was overwhelming. Julian's lawyers tried every angle, but there was no defense against documented fraud. Bank records. Email chains. Witness testimony. All of it painted a clear picture. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Amara attended when she could, though Patricia encouraged her to focus on work rather than sitting in the courtroom every day. You've done your part, Patricia said. The system will handle the rest. Don't give him any more of your time. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the courtroom was packed. Reporters. Victims. Curious observers. Amara sat in the back row with Nicole. Guilty on all counts. Financial fraud. Money laundering. Securities violations. The foreman read each verdict. Guilty. 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 Julian's face crumbled. His lawyers looked defeated. The judge set a sentencing hearing for 4 weeks later. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Amara. Microphones thrust forward. Questions shouted. Ms. Bennett, how do you feel about the verdict? Relieved. Justice has been served. The people he defrauded can start to recover. Do you have any message for your ex-husband? No. I'm focused on the future, not the past. Nicole guided her through the crowd to a waiting car. You did well in there. Composed. Professional. The jury responded well to your testimony. It's over now. Really over. Not quite. There's still sentencing. But yes, the hard part is done. 4 weeks later, Amara returned to the courthouse for Julian's sentencing. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s. She'd reviewed all the evidence. Heard from victims. Considered the probation report. Mr. Sterling, she said, looking directly at Julian, your crimes were calculated and extensive. You defrauded investors of millions of dollars. You laundered money. You showed no remorse. In fact, your attempts to intimidate witnesses, including your ex-wife, demonstrate continued disregard for the law. Julian stood beside his lawyer. His hands were shaking. I'm sentencing you to 15 years in federal prison. No parole eligibility for at least 10 years. Additionally, you will pay restitution to your victims in the amount of $12 million. 15 years. Julian would be in his late 50s when he got out. His prime years gone. His reputation destroyed. His empire ashes. Amara felt no triumph. Just closure. The book was closing on this chapter of her life. After the sentencing, she met Rebecca for coffee. They'd stayed in touch, supporting each other through the trial. "How do you feel?" Rebecca asked. "Lighter. Like I've been carrying him around for 6 months and I can finally put him down." I felt the same way when his arrest was announced. Like permission to move on. Really move on. Not just pretend. They talked about their lives. Rebecca was dating someone new. A kind man. A teacher like her. She was happy but cautious. Learning to trust again. Amara shared updates about her work. The housing project was nearly complete. The first families would move in next month. She'd won an award from the Architecture Association. Was being considered for a major commercial project. "We survived him," Rebecca said. "Both of us. And we're thriving now. That's the best revenge." It's not even revenge. It's just life. Our lives. The ones we're supposed to be living. Walking back to her apartment that evening, Amara thought about the journey. 6 months since the confrontation. 9 months since leaving. A year since she'd started gathering evidence. So much had changed. She changed. Remembered who she was. Became who she was meant to be. The divorce settlement had been finalized months ago. She had financial security. Independence. Resources to build the life she wanted. She'd invested wisely. Saved carefully. Wasn't wealthy by Julian's standards, but comfortable by any reasonable measure. More importantly, she had work she loved. A career she'd rebuilt. Respect she'd earned. Not through association with a powerful man, but through her own talent and dedication. That night, she opened her laptop and looked at new project proposals. A school in an underserved neighborhood. A community center. A partnership with a nonprofit focused on sustainable housing. All of it meaningful. All of it making a difference. All of it hers. She thought about Julian beginning his first night in prison. Facing the consequences of his choices. Learning that actions have weight. That you can't lie and cheat and hurt people without eventually paying the price. She didn't hate him. Didn't wish him more suffering than he'd already face. She just wanted him to be irrelevant. A memory that faded with time. A lesson learned about self-worth and boundaries. And he was, already. The man who'd dominated her life for 3 years was now just someone she used to know. Someone who'd hurt her but hadn't broken her. Someone who'd tried to diminish her but had accidentally freed her instead. Amara closed her laptop. Tomorrow she'd meet with city planners about the school project. Review construction progress on the housing development. Mentor 3 students who'd reached out for guidance. Tomorrow she'd continue building the life Julian had tried to make her believe she couldn't have. The career he'd convinced her to abandon. The independence he'd worked to suppress. Tomorrow she'd prove once again that he'd been wrong about everything. But tonight she'd sleep peacefully. In her own space. On her own terms. With her own dreams. Finally, completely, undeniably free. 6 months after Julian's sentencing, Amara stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Bennett Community Housing Project. The city had named it after her. She'd protested, saying it should reflect the community it served. But the neighborhood association insisted. "You gave us dignity," Mrs. Patterson, a community leader, had said. "Let us give you recognition." The building rose 5 stories. Red brick with large windows. Green spaces surrounding it. Courtyards where children played and neighbors gathered. 60 apartments. Affordable. Beautiful. Exactly what Amara had envisioned. Families were already moving in. She'd met some of them during the construction phase. A single mother with 3 kids. An elderly couple. Young professionals just starting out. All of them deserved homes that reflected their worth. The mayor gave a speech. Patricia spoke about innovative architecture. Damon discussed the construction challenges they'd overcome. Then it was Amara's turn. She looked out at the crowd. Community members. City officials. Architecture students. Colleagues. Friends. Her parents had flown in from Atlanta. Taylor, the student she'd mentored, stood in the front row. "A year ago," Amara began, "I was lost. I'd given up my career. My independence. My sense of self. I'd let someone convince me that my work didn't matter. That I didn't matter. I believed them." She paused. The crowd was silent, attentive. "This building represents my journey back to myself. Every design choice. Every detail. It's proof that we don't have to accept someone else's limited vision of who we are or what we're capable of creating." She gestured to the building. "These apartments aren't just housing. They're homes. Places where people can build lives. Raise families. Feel safe and valued. Architecture at its best serves people. Honors their dignity. Creates spaces where they can thrive." After the ceremony, residents took tours of the building. Amara walked through with them, answering questions, accepting gratitude. One woman, tears in her eyes, hugged her. My children have their own rooms for the first time. Windows with real light. Thank you. Thank you. That evening, Patricia hosted a celebration dinner at her home. Small gathering. Close colleagues. People who'd supported Amara through the hardest year of her life. I'm proud of you, Patricia said, raising a glass. Not just for the building, though it's magnificent, but for the courage you showed. Leaving a toxic situation. Rebuilding your career. Inspiring others to do the same. I couldn't have done it without you, Amara said. You believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. I just reminded you what was already there. The talent, the determination, the integrity. Those were always yours. Driving home that night, Amara reflected on the year. The confrontation at the dinner party felt like a lifetime ago. The person who'd stood in that penthouse, gathering evidence, planning her escape, seemed like someone else. Yet it was her. Just an earlier version. A woman finding her strength, learning her worth, choosing herself. The next morning, Amara had a meeting at Morrison & Associates. A new client. Major project. Commercial building downtown. They specifically requested her. In the conference room, she presented her vision. Not just a building, but a space that integrated with the neighborhood. Ground floor retail supporting local businesses. Rooftop gardens. Energy-efficient design. Community gathering spaces. The clients loved it. Approved the proposal immediately. Another project. Another opportunity to create something meaningful. After the meeting, Taylor stopped by her office. She graduated and landed a position at a small but respected firm. Her work was already gaining attention. I wanted to thank you again, Taylor said. For mentoring me. For showing me it was possible to have standards. To not compromise my vision. You did that yourself. I just offered encouragement. You offered proof. That talent matters. That integrity matters. That we don't have to accept less than we deserve. As Taylor left, Amara thought about the ripple effects. Julian had tried to diminish her. Instead, his cruelty had pushed her to reclaim her power. And that transformation was now inspiring others. Taylor. Other students. Women in similar situations who'd reached out after reading about her story. Pain could become purpose. Trauma could become teaching. Survival could become service. Her phone rang. Nicole Chin. Just wanted to give you an update. The restitution payments are starting. Julian's remaining assets are being liquidated. Victims are getting their money back. Not everything they lost, but substantial amounts. That's good. What about Candace? She completed her community service. She's working at a nonprofit now. Financial literacy education. Teaching people how to spot fraud. She's using her experience constructively. I'm glad. She made mistakes, but she was young. She deserves a second chance. After hanging up, Amara checked her calendar. Full schedule. Design meetings. Site visits. Student mentoring session. Lecture at a local university. Her life was busy but fulfilling. Every day meaningful. Every project purposeful. That weekend, she visited her parents in Atlanta. They'd planned a small gathering. Family and close friends celebrating her success. Low-key. Warm. Exactly what she needed. Her mother pulled her aside before everyone arrived. How are you really doing? Good, Mom. Really good. I'm happy. Fulfilled. I have work I love. People I care about. I'm building a life that feels authentic. No dating? Not yet. Maybe someday. Right now, I'm enjoying being single. Learning who I am outside of a relationship. There's no rush. Smart girl. You've always been smart. Just took you a while to remember. The gathering was perfect. Laughter. Good food. Stories. Amara's father cornered her in the kitchen. I'm proud of you, baby. What you went through. What you overcame. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I learned from you and Mom. You taught me about integrity. Hard work. Self-respect. I just forgot for a while. Julian made me forget. But you remembered. That's what matters. Back in the city Monday morning, Amara had coffee with Rebecca. They'd become genuine friends. Bonded by shared experience but connected by more than trauma. They laughed together. Supported each other. Celebrated each other's victories. I have news, Rebecca said, smiling. I'm engaged. Rebecca, that's wonderful. Tell me everything. His name is Thomas. He's a librarian. Kind. Patient. We've been dating for 8 months. He knows about Julian. About what I went through. He's never tried to rush me or push me. Just been supportive and steady. I'm so happy for you. You deserve this. So do you? When you're ready. I know. And I will be. Eventually. Right now I'm focused on my work. My growth. Becoming the person I'm supposed to be. Romance can wait. 3 months later, Amara received an email. Subject line, opportunity. It was from an international architecture firm. They'd seen her work. Read about her story. Wanted to discuss a partnership. Global projects. Sustainable housing initiatives. Using architecture to address poverty and inequality worldwide. She met with their representatives. Listened to their vision. Reviewed their portfolio. The work was exactly what she'd dreamed about in architecture school. Large-scale impact. Real change. We want you to head our North American division, they said. Design projects that serve communities. Train other architects in sustainable, dignified design. Be the face of our mission. It was overwhelming. Exciting. Exactly the kind of challenge she needed. Can I think about it? Of course. Take your time. But we hope you'll say yes. Your talent and your story inspire people. That's powerful. She discussed it with Patricia. Her parents. Nicole. Rebecca. Everyone encouraged her to take it. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. The kind of career-defining role she'd always wanted. But I'm happy here, Amara said to Patricia. Morrison and Associates feels like home. I'm comfortable. Comfortable isn't bad, Patricia said. But is it enough? You've spent the past year rebuilding. Recovering. Maybe it's time to soar. To see what you're really capable of when you're not just surviving but thriving. A week later, Amara accepted the position. She'd start in 3 months. Enough time to transition her current projects. Say proper goodbyes. Prepare for the next chapter. The night before her last day at Morrison and Associates, she walked through the city. Past the housing project. Past the buildings she'd designed. Past the coffee shop where she'd met Rebecca. Past the courthouse where Julian had been sentenced. Every location held memories. Some painful. Some beautiful. All part of her story. The story of a woman who'd lost herself and found her way back. Who'd been broken and become stronger in the healing. She ended up at the river. Watching the water flow. Steady. Constant. Moving forward. That's what she was doing now. Moving forward. Not running from the past but walking toward the future. Carrying her scars but not letting them define her. Using her pain to fuel her purpose. Julian Sterling was in prison. Would be for years. His empire was destroyed. His reputation ruined. He'd faced consequences. Justice had been served. But his story wasn't hers anymore. It was a chapter she'd closed. A lesson she'd learned. An experience that had shaped her but didn't own her. Her story was the buildings she'd designed. The communities she'd served. The students she'd mentored. The woman she'd become. Strong. Independent. Purposeful. Complete. She pulled out her phone and took a photo of the river. Posted it with a simple caption, "Forward." Comments started appearing immediately. Support. Encouragement. Congratulations on her new position. People she'd inspired. Lives she'd touched. This was the real victory. Not Julian's downfall, though he'd brought that on himself. But her rise. Her growth. Her transformation from victim to survivor to thriver. She was Amara Bennett. Award-winning architect. Community advocate. Mentor. Survivor. And she was just beginning. The best was yet to come.